What's going on, guys? Just kind of sitting here drawing, and I thought, let's do it. Why not do a deep dive into my magic system? It's definitely one of the most refined aspects of my books, at least from a mechanical level, and I figured, yeah, people might find it interesting. So, my magic system. Before I really start to break it down, I wanted to just talk a little bit about my kind of approach to magic as a whole, as it correlates to my world in the sense of where it's derived from. So there's a lot of people that will use a hard magic system within their literature, Sanderson in any one of his novels, Rothfuss, even to kind of a lesser extent, probably not even lesser, but like you have like Brent Weeks has a really innovative magic system with, the Black Prism and that series. But I think one of the hardest parts about coming up with a magic system in 2025 or just in the modern era of contemporary literature is not being derivative, and I think that the expectations placed on an author to have a mechanically sound system is pretty high just with how saturated the market is. And I think that that's okay. That's just a challenge that made writing these books all the more interesting. And it's what made me arrive on the one that I landed on for A Chronicle of Shepherds. So I always knew that I wanted my magic system to be derived and revolve around the five senses. Obviously, that being taste, touch, sight, smell, and hearing. And some of those were really easy to come up with. Like the idea of a shepherd came to me like in its infancy of writing these novels. Like my first iteration of writing or of drawing Fenric here, my protagonist, was a drawing of him weaving into an object, which is, the magical ability to enchant objects. That's, the touch. That's what their magical ability is. But the other ones came a lot more difficult, and I'll get into those in a second, but let's just start with the touch. So the Shepherds ultimately is probably what I would say my book really revolves around. My primary protagonist is Fenric, right here. And who the Shepherds are. The Shepherds are the children of the Eotomni. The Eotomni are cosmic beings that have been allowed to settle on the earth. And not only settle on the earth, but they are allowed to change the earth, to enchant objects, to weave into the earth spells, incantation, magic. This is something that they exclusively can do. And I think that delineation between like enchanting an object and, casting like spells from, whatever, your hands, the air, like I think that delineation was something that I always wanted to stick with. And it's really, really important. So the Eotomni, and by dint of nature, their children, the Shepherds, they cannot like cast spells. They can only weave magic into objects, and then they can use those objects later. It's kind of limiting though, because that object can only do what you have woven it to do, which is an extremely tedious process that I cover in depth in my first novel. But it's also really beneficial because it's not taking really any of your energy. This object will continue to do whatever you intended it to do as long as you can make your incantation hold. So the act of weaving it's very complex, but it is a hard magic system, but it's not necessarily as, let's say, powerful as someone who might hear the voice. We'll get to that later. So the Eotomni were allowed to settle on the earth. They were specifically not permitted to have children with any of the mortals on earth. They forsook that purpose. They began to have children with the daughters of earth. The Eotomni are all male, and their children were called the Shepherds. And it was said that the Shepherds are the only ones that can kill an Eotomni with a sword of stone and steel, the title of my first book. The stone in reference is Akalas. I get into that in depth, and it's not super pertinent to my magic system, so I'm just going to leave it there. But yes, the Shepherds are something akin to demigods. The Eotomni are not gods. They are, again, I only refer to them as cosmic beings. I'm not really going to reveal to you what they are just yet. It's not appropriate, but the shepherds are their children, and their children and the daughters of Earth. Sorry, that was a big stutter. But anyway, that is their unique ability. Every shepherd has this ability, the ability to enchant objects. Again, this must be a stagnant object. You cannot enchant anything with life. You couldn't weave a spell into your body. You couldn't weave a spell into a living tree. But a staff, like a dead piece of wood, you can. I get into the mechanics of that a little bit later into my book. Actually, not later. It's actually very early. We get into why you can't weave into anything with life. But again, I will let you read the book for that. I'm trying to get into my magic system without really spoiling the book for you guys. But those are the shepherds. It's a really, really fun mechanic because they aren't necessarily the most powerful beings in my world, but I just really, really enjoyed their process, and the art of weaving just came so naturally to me. But now, moving on to something that came a lot less naturally to me, was the Eathling. So the Eathling, or sometimes referred to as gardeners, are those who bear the taste, the divine taste. And in my world, there are magical plants, magical trees, and nobody really knows definitively how they got there. There's a lot of theories. There's entire religions built around the original gardener, Ofni. No one really knows if that's actually how these trees came to be, but a lot of people think that this cosmic being that even date the Eotomni and the Shathran and time itself wandered the earth, just planting seeds that eventually turned into magical plants. Some people think that magic is just kind of this ambiguous force that's all around us and sometimes manifests itself into a single seed. There's a lot of theories. I, as the author, am not going to go into what I think actually happened just yet. We might allude to it in my books, but regardless, they exist. And for whatever reason, there is a race of people that can derive specific magical powers from the fruits that each tree bears. And this was, I'm not going to lie to you guys, coming up with the taste was difficult for me. I had a couple of the senses. Hearing the voice was easy. The art of weaving was easy. Sight was easy. But taste, what do you do with that? You have the divine sense of taste. How does that manifest itself? This is what I came up with. And I really, really, really enjoy where we are at with the Eathling. It is so much fun coming up with the Eathling. A lot of them are kind of mimicked around more primitive Native American culture. One of my best friends is he lives on the reservation up here, and we hunt on the reservation. His family's very close to me, and I've just loved their culture so much, and I really wanted to include it into my book. And I really felt that their respect for nature, as a magical people would have, such as the Eathling, really lent itself towards that culture. So that's why I chose it. Now, the Eathling are not capable of planting any of these trees. They can all they really do is they have, for whatever reason, their race of people can eat the fruit of these magical trees and they can gain its power. It is that simple. It's not something that they work towards. It's given by birthright, much like the shepherds. They are the two magic systems that I have that are given by birthright. And what that causes is the different tribes of Eathling have a tendency to make their homes wherever these magical trees exist. So there's 3 magical trees kind of in Fenelore. There's the Ukiah tribe up in the Northern Reach, which technically isn't a part of Fenelore. Ilevara gave that to the Ukiah people after the first Finnish revolution. Then there's the Ashanti tribe that live in the Dwarven ruins of Rockham, because that is where their tree is planted. And then there's another tribe up here near Bonto. And again, each of these cultures are similar in that they are tribal, not at all nomadic, but fiercely loyal to their own. Their cultural aspects, in the sense that they, like, their lives revolve around these trees, is similar. But where they differ wildly is their culture. The Ukiam tribe's fruit gives them very different power than the Ashanti tribe. The Ashanti tribe, they eat berries, and their berries, after eaten over time, alter them physically, basically leaving them to be these just behemoth people, physically strong, lean, fierce. They're described as being 7 feet and taller on average. It's not even like magic. They can't use spells or anything like that. It's just, it changes them physically. Whereas a normal person, if they were to eat of this plant, nothing happens. It's, they don't die or anything. It's just nothing happens. But the magic within them can only be absorbed by those with the taste. Again, this is another trait that is given by birthright, and not much is known about its origin, but exploring the different tribes and their cultures has turned into something extremely fun for me as an author, and how they would interact with the countries around them, and also what it would look like, within their own tribe. It's just, I've really, really enjoyed it. And some of the trees give you, or some of the plants give you a lot more hard magic symptoms, such as, like, there's one where an ability is activated as soon as you take a bite, you turn invisible. That's what it is. And obviously you can see the practical uses behind that. It's, one of the trees, it makes you glow. It's, pointless in almost all situations, but, not all, you don't get to choose what the tree makes you do. It's just what it does. Anyway, so those are the Aethling, and that is the taste. Then what we have is the voice, which is also, it's hearing. So you can hear the voice, and this is going to be your hard magic. This is going to be like a wizard. So this is something that is not given by birthright, and an Aethling or a shepherd cannot obtain the ability to hear the voice. It's, technically forbidden within my world, and no one has heard of any of the shepherds or the Aethling ever trying to submerge. It's an extremely rare occurrence, and only people really attempt to do it, and we're talking like maybe a century if a well appears. And what a well is a magical occurrence that happens seemingly at random across my world. And it's a very large part of the first book, and there's a lot of ambiguity behind how these wells appear, if it's random, if it's chaos, or if it truly is, there is a method, there is order behind it. But it is very much cultural, and it's just cultural understanding of, this is how wizards are born. It is a well. And very, very, very few people have ever seen one. And the majority of people who do find one, which again is a very small number, they submerge into its depths and they don't ever come out. Most of them just die there. But the ones that do come out of these wells, they come out with power that is unadulterated by man. They are true wizards. They can speak the tongue of old. They hear the voices of the Shathrin. They are wizards. And it was a much easier decision to make them kind of like the way that I have it kind of working, I guess the power hierarchy of my world as it comes to magic, because every magic system is going to have people that are more powerful and less powerful, and I would put like the shepherds, this is a very crude like graph, but the shepherds and the Aethling are kind of on par with each other in that their magic is very much limited to, for the shepherds, it's limited on to what they have previously decided to embed into an object, and for the Aethling, it is limited to whatever it is that their source of power grants them. Now, there's nothing to say that an Aethling couldn't go to another tribe of Aethling and eat of their tree. It would still work. It's not like they can only eat of their magical tree. But then you're traveling across the country to insert into another tribe of Aethling, which does happen. There's rapport between the different tribes of Aethling, but we don't need to get into that right now. It's not super pertinent to the magic system. But what we have is those who can hear the voice, those who can speak the tongue of old, are absolutely more powerful than either of them two. And what I wanted to do when coming up with a magic system was it has to be both possible to obtain by ordinary folk, by people, if you're going to have some that just have magic by birthright. I think that was really important to kind of balance out my world. You know, if you're going to have people that just are born with magic, like, you know, I don't know, like a Harry Potter or even something like the inheritance cycle, people that just have a natural ability to use magic in some capacity, I think that there's also got to be some sort of mechanic for people to obtain magic in some capacity. And these people, those who have surfaced, are so few. Truly, there's like, most people can only name a dozen throughout all of time. But again, it's high risk, high reward. And they are significantly more powerful than either the shepherds or the Aethling. Now, also, what we have below those who have surfaced below, like what we call them is wizards. At least the one we see in book 1, he is a wizard, but really what they choose to do with their power is kind of what defines their title. Like, we have necromancers, we have wizards, we have, I guess, sorcerers, warlocks. Like, again, the name behind them specifically is something granted to them by their people, which, you know, varies from culture to culture. It's not necessarily a divine naming convention like with these two. But kind of below all of these three is going to be those who obtain the scent or smell. And this is a much lower form of magic. And it's granted pretty much at random to humans who encounter Nadri. And Nadri are servants to the Shathrin being those who spawn wells. Again, that's explained a little bit more in depth to my book, but every once in a while, after a Shathrin who is not permitted to live on this earth leaves, you know, sometimes they'll accidentally leave behind one of their servants, a Nadri. And this Nadri will just kind of float around until it finds someone to kind of dissipate into, and it will grant them a little bit of power. Typically, sometimes it's very insignificant, and sometimes it's actually super useful. There's a person that we hear about, not even in my first book, much later on in my story, who has a scent. He can smell the truth, which is a very odd mechanic that actually comes in super helpful. And, you know, is it going to help you in a fight? Not really. Is it going to help you on the field of battle? No. But if you know whether or not someone's lying, it's extremely useful. And so that's kind of my lowest form of magic system, is going to be down here, attached to scent, smell. And then lastly comes the sight. And the sight lands right in the middle here. And sight is something that every living thing has in my world. And it manifests itself in a myriad of ways. Fenric bears the cursed sight of Nakim, which I'm not going to get into that right now. You learn about it pretty early on in my story, but it's some people, it lies dormant to where they don't even know. Some people, it reveals things happening through the course of dreams. That's what most scholars believe in my world, is that all dreams are a manifestation of the sight in some way. There are some people who, there's a trope that, like the blind guy with a stick. I have one of those. It's a trope I can't get away from. He's super, super cool. We meet him, and actually, I'm not going to tell you when we meet him, but he's super cool. He bears a different manifestation of the sight. The point is, the sight is something that everybody has, and sometimes it's very deliberate, and sometimes you would go your entire life and not know what it is. I would say most people don't know what their, I guess, sight is, but it's been very ingrained in culture that at least that kind of understanding, some people are aware of this, most people are not. So yeah, that is my magic system. I might do another video, or like another series of videos going kind of more in depth to each individual magic system, and like do a video on the art of weaving, a video on the voice and the history behind hearing the voice. I haven't really decided that yet. As it is, this is a very long video, I'm certain of. I don't even know how long I've been talking, but yeah, so that's just a little introduction into the magic system of my world. If you have any questions, actually genuinely feel free to ask, because I'm happy to answer them, as much as I can without giving away too much in my book. Like, I want you guys to read it and discover this as you go along. But if you're not going to read my book and you're just interested in how an author might come up with something like this, or just a creative as an artist in general, this is how. This is how. Oh man, there's a couple other things that I wanted to say in this video, but it's late and I don't want to restart the video. So yeah, ask me questions if you have any. Thank you so much, guys.